With so many services exposed to the public internet, they are tempting targets for hackers attempting to cause disruption and steal private information. Even if you do prevent these attacks, which happens most of the time, quite often you need to prove that you have to auditors and regulatory bodies. Quite often these can be unintentional, like someone forgetting a login or attempting to open a file they didn't know they didn't have access to. But when seen at scale, this can indicate something more malicious that you should pay attention to. In this video, I show you how to use Falco to detect certain issues and vulnerabilities and log them to Parsable in different log streams depending on the severity of the issue using FluentBit. Risks can occur at many levels and layers of the modern cloud-native stack, from the obvious to the less obvious, including users attempting to gain pseudo access to an instance, opening sensitive files, too many incorrect logins, unexpected inbound or outbound connections, attempting to schedule cron jobs, and launching package managers to install or uninstall certain applications and services. Okay then, let's get started. So first, if you haven't already, let's add the Helm repository and update it. Always pays to be sure. And now we can install. And this will take a little bit of time. You can, of course, use the command line. I sometimes like to use Lens because it's a bit more visible that things are still starting up here, but soon they will be ready. Next, just to check things, we'll follow the trigger rule step here to get something to kind of play with. So we'll add the Nginx deployment. That's usually pretty quick and generate a few security issues. So far, we don't really see those. So let's now add Falco Sidekick, which does a few things. It has a web UI, which will help us just see what's going on as we go through this, but lets you route issues to all sorts of different places. And of course, we're going to do Parsable in this case. It's actually pretty easy to add. You just need to add some flags to that Helm command. So here, we can just run the Helm upgrade and pass the Falco Sidekick enabled flag and also the web UI. This will, again, take a little bit of time for everything to get deployed, as you can see. And now if we start up the port forward, we could do it from the command line. Again, I'm going to do it in the visual lens here, just easier to see what we've enabled and haven't, and then have to have multiple terminals open. And then open up the forwarded port. The default login details are admin and admin, and you should already start to see those warning messages, and we can generate a few more as well and see them all flooding in quite quickly. So we know everything's working here. And something interesting to look at here, which will help with later stages, is to take a look at the JSON payload here, so we get an idea of the fields that will be available that come into use in later stages. The next step is to get Parsable running also in Kubernetes with Helm. So we'll do this first. Create a namespace if it doesn't exist already. And then again, create a secret from that file here, which sets the username and password and a few other things. Add the Helm repository if it doesn't exist already, and get things running, setting it to be running locally, which you do with this flag here. And finally, we'll start the port forwarding and get a new terminal tab open for the next steps. Firstly, we can check that Parsable is running. Again, the default username and password are admin and admin as defined in this secrets file. And so far, there's going to be nothing here. We'll start sending events now. There's one more piece of the puzzle, and that's to get FluentBit running in Kubernetes too. Now, just to explain what's happening here. So Falco Sidekick passes the event from Falco to something, and we're going to use FluentBit in this particular case, mostly because Parsable is also compatible with it, but you can see there are some other options. It just seemed to be the simplest and most flexible option, as you'll see later. So the next step is to install FluentBit into Kubernetes. So again, add the Helm repository if it doesn't exist already. Go. And again, this will take a little bit of time to get going. And to do the port forward here, it's a bit more dynamic. So you just copy and paste and then run these commands. There we go. Another port forward. So we need another terminal. And one of the reasons to use FluentBit is it offers a lot of configuration options, but there's a lot you need to figure out and how to configure. You can see the default values file that comes with the Helm chart here. Most of it we're not very interested in. Actually, mostly only interested in the part at the bottom. This is all the kind of Kubernetes configuration. This is actually the FluentBit configuration. So to recap a few things, service is kind of the general service details, inputs, and there's a wide variety of plugins that you can see on this link here. Filters, how you can sort of filter the events moving forward, which you can also see mentioned here. And then outputs, and you can see some examples here. And I'm going to jump into the configuration I used and explain the details of that from there. So the service we can mostly leave as is. For inputs, we use tail to just tail all the container logs, basically. All the logs from each container. This is a special setting to handle Docker. And then we tag them with this kube.star. So it basically prefixes kube to all of the fields, for example, that you saw here. And this is some extra kind of configuration. The filter is where things become a little bit more interesting. So this is a specific filter for Kubernetes. It matches this tag. Everything is a match and to a tag. We're going to merge more complex log items, for example, like this. And they're going to be merged into a new log called a log process. By default, they're stored in a field called a log. And we're saying, do we want to keep the original? No, in this case. And these are actually additional settings that you can use annotations in various Kubernetes YAML files to override. I'm just going to leave them on for now, even though I'm not actually really using them. And the other filter, this is a relatively simple one. This is using grep to match on the kube star tag and matches on a regex. And what is this matching? It's relatively simple in this particular first example. It's matching this priority notice, or in this particular case, priority warning, which we can see here instead. So we only want to filter and keep those, basically. And then finally, we output to parsable. Again, this is matching on the kube star tag. It's using the HTTP output plugin and using the DNS address inside Kubernetes, various access information, meta tags you can add to the HTTP request, including, most importantly in this particular case, the name of a log stream and the API endpoint to hit in Parsable. With all of those in place, let's send that updated values file to FluentBit and then restart the port forward. And again, let's trigger a few more errors. Refresh that Parsable dashboard and you should see that one log stream there with purely warning events. If we scroll over, you can see those here. So far, so good. Let's make this a bit more interesting. And as you can see in the Sidekiq GUI, there's more than just warning events. We actually have notices as well. So maybe we want to retain both, but do different things and route them to different log streams to have different alerts, for example. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So there's a couple of small changes you need to make here, not too many. We add a second filter using the rewrite tag plugin. Again, it matches this tag up here. And here, this uses regex with a little bit of extra. So this dollar symbol in FluentBit means the top level field, which we know in this case is the merge log there. It then matches the priority field and any value, so warning and notice, and then rewrites it to a new tag called ps dot and the name of the captured group here, so warning or notice. And false in this case means, do you want to keep this original value? So in this particular case, I'm saying no, but you can set it to true if you want to. And this is actually just a metrics field you can add. I'm not really going to use it, but if you wanted to actually track metrics on FluentBit itself into Prometheus or something like that, you could. Next, we change some outputs. I've added this standard output here, which I found very useful for debugging. I'm not actually going to show an example of it here, but I found it very helpful when I was trying to figure out what values I wanted here. It wasn't always immediately obvious to begin with. So this is I'm just showing this as an example because it's helpful for debugging. And these outputs are pretty much the same as before, but there's a couple of small differences. We have 2 log streams, one for warn, one for notice, and the match is slightly different. We're going to match them specifically on that new tag. So ps.warning or ps.notice into the appropriate stream. So resend those updated values. Again, start that port forward. And this time we'll create a few new events. And you can now see there are 2 different log streams. One for all the notices. It's a lot of extra information we may not need to know. It's likely to have a lot more in it. And one for the warnings, which will be pretty similar to the one in the first example. So what I'm going to do is on the warning only log stream, we'll set an alert. So we want someone to be notified when there is a potential security violation. So we'll give it a name. We'll set the rule, which in this case is the priority. And you can now see this new merged field here, equal to warning. And I'm going to use a webhook. I'm going to use this example webhook here. A repeat interval of, let's say, 10 seconds. Hit save. Okay, now come back to this. Let's just generate a few more. And jump over to that webhook. And there we go. We can see it is now sending alerts. There we go. There's the message. Yeah. To a webhook. In this video, I looked at how to use Falco to detect potential security issues and violations and log them to Parsable for long-term analysis, auditing, and generating alerts to interested parties. Currently, some things you could try in the future is adjusting the filtering that I set up in FluentBit to direct to more than the 2 log streams I showed you, or also based on different severities, based on different types of issue, and thus notify the relevant teams who want to take care of those particular issues, like user accounts, security teams, audit teams, etc., etc. You could do this with all of those various FluentBit configuration items, plus complex regular expression. With the flexibility of Parsable and FluentBit, the possibilities are endless.